very good evening, friends. Welcome to the Facebook Live Challenge by TAS. At the outset, I would like to congratulate TAS for starting such a new program with all the non-COVID topics, and I would also like to thank Hetal Bhai for taking so much efforts to make this program successful and also to challenge me. He has challenged me to speak on the topic of my choice, and I have decided to speak on non-operating room anesthesia, that is NORA. Terribly simple or simply terrible. The reason I chose this topic was whenever we discuss NORA amongst us, I found the house is divided in two sets of people. One found it very simple, and another group found it very high risk. So, my objectives today are simple to achieve. I just want to tell people who thinks NORA is a simple thing that it can be simply terrible. And to those who think that it is a high risk, I want to tell that we can make it terribly simple. So, why are we actually talking about it? If we see this data from Mayo Clinic, between 2009 and 2018, the percentage of all anesthesia service as NORA cases have rise from 30% to 52%, a whopping 70% rise in just 10 years. Can you imagine that 52% of all cases in Mayo Clinic are NORA? Although we don't have any India data to publish, but we as an individual practitioner, we all have seen rise in NORA cases in our last decade of practice. So why? Why these cases have increased? Because of the advent of less invasive procedures, an aging population with increased. Hello?
You speak loudly.
Okay. An aging population with increasing comorbidity burden, increased proficiency of proceduralist, growing sensitivity towards pain, and of course for the economics of the healthcare environment. So, how it can be simply terrible? Just we'll just have a look at NORA closed claims data and what does it tell us. In last decade, it was it was actually analyzed, the data suggested that there is a higher risk than the OR in NORA cases, and most of the NORA claims are from GI suits. But what happened in this decade? Now the data is suggesting us that NORA has lower risk than the operating room cases, and most of the claims are arising from cardiology and radiology. However, in 50% claims involving death, patients received substandard anesthesia care. Please mind the words substandard anesthesia care, preventable by improved monitoring techniques. Most claims were related to inadequate oxygenation and or ventilation. MAC was the most common anesthetic technique used, contributing to 50% of the claims. So this was all Western data. How about Indian data? I'm sorry to say, but I couldn't find any Indian data. All the Indian data I could find were in newspapers. So these were the headlines I could gather. So definitely there are complications in India also. So why is it so challenging? What are the challenges in NORA? It is challenging because of the challenging environment. It is challenging because of the challenging patients and the challenging procedures. So let's take one by one and let's divide the challenging environment into three parts: space, equipment, and staff, for the sake of understanding and for the sake of addressing the problems. So, the problem of space in NORA, I found this picture truly depicts the scenario. Most of the times when we enter the NORA scenario, we found an operator who is very worried and his or her assistant who is very talkative and not at all paying attention to the procedure. The room is dimly lit, closed, cramped space, and this poor boy is anesthetist who just entered and actually has no idea what is going on. So, what are the challenges of a space here? It is an unfamiliar location, it's cold, it's dimly lit, it's cramped, it's noisy. You have restricted visualization of the patient and restricted access to the patient, and of course, there is exposure to ionizing radiation. What are the challenges of equipment here? I can safely assume that all of us anesthetists are in habit of driving this swanky Ferrari. But when you go to NORA scenario, you get this. So what we get there? Older or malfunctioning machines. There is always a curious case of missing monitors. Emergency drugs may be there, may not be there. Difficult airway cart may be there, may not be there. IV line extensions may be there, may not be there. Now come to the environmental challenges of staff. I think it has happened to most of us. Whenever you ask, sister, please give me a mask, and you get this. It's not their fault. They are unfamiliar with anesthesia equipments, they are unfamiliar with anesthesia drugs, anesthesia emergencies. They are not at all trained for post anesthesia care. They are sometimes consider the anesthesia team as outsiders. So, now come to the challenging patients. After the challenging environment, let's come to the challenging patients. How these patients are challenging. If you see this data, they have analyzed cases between 2010 to 2014 in the operation room in NORA. What they have seen here is that in NORA, there are greater percentage of cases who are ASA 3 to 5. What does it mean in simple terms? We are treating older, sicker, comorbid, and most of them are outpatient. So we have little opportunity to optimize them, and they have complex anomalies. This makes us treating these patients. These are the challenging ones. Now come to the challenging procedures. Procedures are challenging because they are novel. Just by their novelty, they come with inexperience. The person who is performing the procedure is inexperienced, you are inexperienced, and we often have inadequate understanding of the newer procedures. Unpredictable duration. This makes the procedure even more challenging. Imagine you are doing a neonate for cardiac cath, and the cardiologist is taking 30 minutes, 20 minutes just to take the vascular access. It is not uncommon. It happens more often than not. Mid-procedure rescue calls. It is a well-laid trap. Monitored anesthesia care to general anesthesia. You might have to give anything in these procedures. So this particularly makes these procedures challenging. So in a nutshell, if I say what we do in NORA, we actually do complex, unpredictable procedures on sicker patients in cold, cramped, dimly lit space with outdated machines and limited monitors. Does it sound simple? Of course not. But we can actually make it terribly simple. How? Let's see how we can address the challenges. Environmental challenges. Space. It is an unfamiliar space to us. Just apply a simple logic of home and away game. OT is like our home turf. We go and play daily there. Okay. But NORA spaces, they are actually the away games for us. So just reach in advance, get yourself familiarized with the space, locate everything. Where is the machine? Where is the oxygen port? Where is the electrical outlet? Where is the suction? Where is the drug cart? Locate everything. Then equipments, ensure the availability of equipments. There is no other way. If you are not equipped, just say no. Say no to the procedures. And for a staff, there is nothing but training. Train them according to your protocols, train them about anesthesia, train them about anesthesia emergencies, train them about anesthesia equipments. And for critical procedures, bring your own anesthesia technician along with you. Be Atmanirbhar. Always remember that adverse events are attributed to operator error or failure to rescue. So, always ensure that you have done a PAC, howsoever brief it may be. You have to have a pre-operative assessment. Patient is NBM. You have talked to the patient. You have reassured the patients or the parents. You have ensured proper fluid management equipments. You have wide bore cannula, you have fluids, everything. And since these places are actually cold, you should take care of the temperature of the patient, pay special attention to hypothermia. Do not proceed without SOAP MI. Suction, oxygen, airway, emergency drugs, monitors. For monitors, all the guidelines they suggest that the standard of monitor in NORA places has to be equivalent to the operating room. But unfortunately, in Indian setups, we have till now failed to ensure or enforce the ISA and ASA standard monitoring guidelines in all our operation theaters. So just forget about the NORA places. So what you should do, in my humble opinion, we should stick to at least a pulse oximeter and a BP cuff. So what are there to go with it? Non-pharmacological techniques. These are actually the most underutilized techniques by anesthetists. Sleep deprivation. Just you have to ask the patient to wake up 2 hours prior to usual time. This is very effective in small children. Reassurance. Keep the kids in quiet and dark room, and breastfeeding for the breastfeeding kids up to 6 months of age. You all know about the parental and non-parental routes, but the bottom line is you always have to be prepared for GA. What are the general principles to select the technique? Age, weight, and comorbidities of the patient, nature and duration of the procedure, and we have to take into account what is desired from us. Is it analgesia, immobility, or just angiolysis? But in any case, again, remember to be prepared for GA always. This is the bottom line for NORA. Be prepared for GA. If you ask me to name a single pitfall in NORA scenario, I will say excessive reliance on the pulse oximeter. Just by the nature of oxygen dissociation curve, by the time we see hypoxemia on pulse oximeter, the critical time is lost. So always pay attention to the chest movements. And if you ask me about the dilemmas, it is always to intubate or not to intubate. That is the question. So After having a general overview of the how to overcome the challenges, let's visit the specific NORA scenario one by one. So let's first visit the endoscopy, where nowadays we are doing all the advanced procedures like OM, EMR, EST, over the scope clips, endosonobiopsies, or cystogastrostomies. These are all the high risk procedures which actually demands higher anesthesia depth. They expect us to maintain the patency of the upper airway, preserving the spontaneous ventilation, suppressing the cough reflex, preserving the gag reflex in colonoscopy to prevent aspiration, and of course, anesthesia should wear off rapidly because most of them are daycare procedures. So let's visit the endoscopy room in practice. Definitive airway devices like SGDs and ET tubes are actually not that useful in endoscopy room. But again, when to intubate? The dilemma. Whenever there is active bleed, go for a rapid sequence induction. If the patient is unstable or critical, go for intubation. In some of the centers, ERCP is done under general anesthesia with endotracheal tube. However, what works for me is a combination of ketamine and Dexmed. I prepare this drug ketamine 2 mg per kg, Dexmed 0.5 microgram per kg, dilute the mix to 10 ml and just give a loading dose of 4 ml. You will see a nice endoscopy after this. Thereafter, just 1 ml as and when required. Even for ERCP, I prefer the same method. Next, let's go to the interventional pulmonology, where we'll do EBUS with transbronchial needle aspiration, balloon bronchoplasty, airway stent, bronchoalveolar lavage, cryobiopsies, anything. For that, we need suppression of airway reflexes, suppression of cough reflexes, nasal anesthesia, educate oropharyngeal anesthesia. We should not lose the ability to ventilate, and of course, early recovery in all NORA scenarios. So in practice, what happens? Nasal anesthesia can be achieved with phenylephrine and lidocaine 4%. Oral anesthesia can be achieved by spraying lignocaine 10% on the anterior tonsillar pillar base. We should use anticyanogogues most definitely in pulmonology. Pre-oxygenation is a key in this practice. Most commonly used agent is TIVA. Supraglottic devices are of great help here. Oxygen insufflation through bronchoscope must be secured. Spontaneous ventilation and relaxants are a decision has to be taken according to the procedure and after the discussion with the proceduralist. What works for me? For diagnostics, I just go with propofol and local spray of trachea with 4% lignocaine. For advanced, I put iGel under propofol, continue on TIVA, introduce the bronchoscope through iGel, and then I do oxygen insufflation through the bronchoscope. It actually works very well. You don't lose control of airway at any time. If you find any difficulty, you can always ventilate the patient. Let's go to the interventional radiology, where we do most of the critical patients of cerebral aneurysm embolization, peripheral stenting, PTBDs, varicose veins laser. For most of these, they demand immobility and analgesia. But for cerebral aneurysm coilic, you are required to optimize cerebral blood flow, control perfusion pressure, maintain intracranial pressure, and tackle the intra-op complications like cerebral aneurysm rupture. So in practice, it has been said that epidural, spinal, and nerve blocks they improve the perfusion after stenting. But most of the cases can be done under sedation. For carotid stenting, atropine should always be kept ready. GA and endotracheal tube is the technique for the aneurysm coiling. Always keep an eye on BP. Go for invasive monitoring for aneurysm coiling. What works for me here are varicose veins. I do under spinal. Most of other cases are under sedation. But for aneurysm coiling, always go for invasive monitoring, GA, TIVA with endotracheal tube. I avoid Dexmed here just for the sake of sometimes it leads to fall in BP, which is generally not desirable. And it is very difficult to up the BP after Dexmed. In radio diagnosis, now I have kept the two procedures, radio diagnosis and cath lab in the end, and these are the procedures which actually generate a lot of claims we have already seen for this decade at least. So, MRI, CT angiography, CT coronary angio, image guided biopsies, these are the procedures which are usually done. What is expected from us is analgesia, immobility, angiolysis, and for CT coronary angio, they demand bradycardia. In practice, if we receive a call from MRI that an adult patient is there and we need to go there, he is not ready to enter into the MRI machine, or for any reason, they give us a call, patient is for GA. It can be because of claustrophobia. It can be because of maybe patient is of Parkinsonism. He is having involuntary movement. He is a post-stroke patient who is having involuntary movements, or simply patient is of back pain. He has severe back spasm, and patient is not able to lie down. So our choice of technique, choice of anesthesia will depend upon this thing. Probably if the patient has back spasm, give a simple injection of a skeletal muscle relaxant and a painkiller and our job is done. In radio diagnosis, we have to use a lot of non-pharmacological techniques also. In kids, generally we give oral sedatives, triclofos. But always remember that this oral sedative doesn't actually obviate the need of monitoring. You have to monitor the patient. And yes, we always use short acting beta blockers, esmolol for bradycardia, which is desired in CT coronary angio. But there is a catch. Some of the centers they prefer to give oral beta blocker to the patient in the morning of the test. So always take the history whether they have taken the oral beta blocker in the morning, and you can then adjust the dose accordingly. So MRI for kids are the most common request, and sometimes it is the trickiest one. So I have prepared myself a ready reckoner table. If the kid is 0 to 6 months age and weighing 2 to 5 kgs, I go for breastfeed or sucrose plus breastfeed. Give them a nice, quiet, dark room and they will fall asleep. You can do the MRI there. I generally would try to avoid sedatives on a developing brain. But if it doesn't help, I'll go for triclofos 25 mg per kg. For 6 months to 2 years, I straight away go for triclofos 50 mg per kg. Or if possible, give them the appointment in the morning, early morning, ask for sleep deprivation of 2 hours and give triclofos 50 mg. It will surely help. But the trickiest age group is 2 to 5 years or 10 to 20 kgs. Here, sometimes the oral triclofos alone doesn't help. So give a combination of triclofos 50 mg per kg and promethazine 0.5 mg per kg. This is the combination. It works most of the times. In around 5 to 10% of the times, it doesn't help. In those cases, I will go for midazolam 0.2 mg, and ketamine 5 mg per kg oral. Remember, this tastes like hell, so you have to add little bit of sucrose to it just to make them gulp it. But a little bit of warning here, the effect might linger on later on for close to 3 hours by oral ketamine. So you have to make patient stay in the hospital for that many hours. For more than 5 years, of course, there is IV, no oral. Let's go to the cardiac cath lab now. Now, cardiac cath lab, anesthesia in cardiac cath lab is an entirely different topic in itself. Somebody should take up a challenge to speak on this for 1 hour, full 1 hour. Now, nowadays we are doing so many difficult, complicated procedures in cath labs, primary PTCS, CTOs, device closures, pacemaker, AICD, coarctoplasty, balloon valvuloplasties, TAVI, EPSTDs, so on and so forth. Pediatric cardiac cath is altogether a different game. And I believe that anesthesia in cardiac cath lab should be provided by trained cardiac anesthetists. But unfortunately, cath labs outnumber the trained cardiac anesthetists. So non-cardiac anesthetists like you and me have to go there and present and give our services. So what is expected there from us? Most important thing is monitoring. And if you know TEE, it's better. We are expected to ensure stable hemodynamics, immobility, and analgesia. So in adults, in cath lab practice, the first thing is radiation safety. If you are not provided with all the protective equipments, do not enter the cath lab. Diligent monitoring is must. Make full use of all the invasive lines put by the cardiologist over there. Look for the trends. These trends actually gives us an early warning in case the things are going south. When to intubate? I think in adults, my decision to intubate will be if at all they are using TE for any procedure. Now, mid-procedure rescue calls, as I have told you, are actually very dangerous. You don't know what is there. You don't know what is prepared there. If all the drugs are there, if the airway cart is ready over there, and most common calls we get are for pulmonary edema during the procedure in adults or CPR. If they are performing a diagnostic cardiac cath, please talk to the cardiologist beforehand and ensure whether they are also doing oximetry. If they are doing oximetry, do not give oxygen beforehand because it might interfere with the results and diagnosis later on. So, do not give oxygen in these cases. Always put cardiac OT on standby for valvuloplasty or device closure cases. What works here? My suggestion would be to sit in the console or at least stay away from the fluoro. Stay at least 2 meters away from the fluoro just for the sake of monitoring. Best is to sit in the console and watch the monitor and the patient both. Generally used sedation techniques are midazolam and fentanyl. Now come to the pediatric cardiac cath. This is altogether a different game. Understand the pathology. You have to actually look for two things. If there is shunt, if it is there, right to left, left to right, and the pulmonary hypertension, whether pulmonary hypertension is present or not. Discuss the pathology and procedure with the cardiologist. Most of the times in these procedures, there are only three painful steps. Rest of the times, all which is expected from you is immobility of the kid. These three painful steps are infiltration of the local anesthesia, second is introduction of the sheath, and third is when they change over the sheath to the bigger sheath. These are the three painful steps. You have to keep your patients on deeper planes in these three procedures. Now, to intubate or not, this dilemma has to be discussed with the pediatric cardiologist who is operating. No air bubbles in IV in pediatric cath lab. Always keep vitals at plus minus 10% of the baseline. Do not worry if the saturation is 60%, heart rate is 130. If the saturation is 60%, try to keep saturation, do whatever. Try to keep saturation between 55 and 65%. If heart rate is 120, try to keep it between 110 and 130. For neonates, you must pay extra attention to the blood sugar levels. If the procedure lasts long, monitor RBS and pay special attention to hypothermia. It will be a good practice to keep these kids sedated post-procedure so that they don't move their legs and hematoma is not formed at the puncture site. What works for me is a bit controversial. I do not do anything to decrease SVR. Whatever drug I choose, it doesn't affect systemic vascular resistance. I do not intubate the patient. Yes, if I am given a fancy workstation in cath lab with good ventilator, I might think of doing intubation. But since it is not available, I don't intubate the patient and keep my hands free. What works for me there is midazolam, fentanyl, and ketamine. I always wrap them in cotton. Howsoever, I am saying that I do not intubate, but I am always prepared for general anesthesia. So bottom line for NORA in pediatric cardiac cath will be always be prepared for GA. So what are the key takeaways to improve your practice safety in NORA? If you ask me what is the single intervention you should do to improve safety in your practice, I would suggest to reach at the NORA site in advance. Get there in advance, get yourself familiarized with the things, just understand the dynamics between the staff over there, how they are talking, who is in charge, who can assist you. All these things can be assessed if you are reaching in advance. Always remember, if you are failed to prepare, you are prepared to fail. Do not proceed without SOAP MI. If any of this thing is not there, just say no. Learn to say no in case you feel that monitoring is not adequate. Always have an open communication with the operator and the staff. Always talk to the patient or the parents of the patient. Always reassure them. Train the staff or bring your own assistant. Be Atmanirbhar. That is all from my side on this important topic. At the end, I would again like to thank us and also all of you for your patient listening. Thank you and have a nice week ahead.